Mr. Schellenberger, when you last testified before our subcommittee, you responded to a question from Chairman Jordan when he asked about the Hunter Biden laptop story, and I'm going to quote what you said. You said, quote, "Now maybe the FBI agents who were going to Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook and to Twitter executives were warning about a hack and leak potentially involving Hunter Biden. Maybe those guys didn't have anything to do with the guys that had the laptop. We just don't know." Well, you know what? Now we do know. And we know after interviewing Laura Demlow, who at the time of the Hunter Biden laptop story was on the Foreign Influence Task Force, we have learned from her that she and others on that task force did in fact know about the laptop before the New York Post story broke, and they knew it was his. In other words, the work done in the years since the release of the Twitter files has continued to expose the extent of the censorship industrial complex. These discoveries show the importance of your testimony and the oversight work that has been done by this committee. What do you think this shows in terms of the complexity and scope of the censorship industrial complex? What I mean by that is, even though with the trove of information that you released over a year ago, or approximately a year ago, we're still filling in the gaps to understand the extent of what the federal government has engaged in terms of violating the First Amendment.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things that it shows is that the censorship is in service of disinformation. It wasn't that they prevented the New York Post from publishing. It wasn't even that they did, the tweet eventually did come back on Twitter, was eventually allowed. But the disinformation that was planted, that myself and all my family and friends believed, was that there was something fraudulent about the Hunter Biden laptop, which we now know was actually the Hunter Biden laptop. It's been verified now by all the major media and everybody else. So, but it created the perception that it was misinformation by the Russians. And of course, that conspiracy theory continues to be peddled today. So that's what it did. And that's how these guys at CTIL thought about it. That's how all of these operatives that are used to waging disinformation campaigns and psyops in foreign countries turned those tools against the American people.
And that's the critical point. They have been turned against the American people.
Absolutely.
What do you think about the fact that the FBI agents warning Twitter about a hack and leak were the same agents who knew that of the existence and legitimacy of that laptop? What do you think about those people?
It's shocking. I mean, like you said, I was trying to only report on what we knew at the time, but obviously when that came out, it's absolutely shocking that you would have FBI sitting on this information in 2019 and then seeding the idea that there would be a hack and leak coming. I mean, it wasn't just Aspen Institute, it was also Stanford came out, and they used that as a pretext to attack the Pentagon Papers principle upheld by the Supreme Court that when journalists like us are leaked information, we can publish it and we're protected by the First Amendment. We saw Stanford Institute attacking that precedent and saying journalists should no longer follow the Pentagon Papers principle. They should no longer report on information leaked to them. They should not do what Matt and I and Alex just did with publishing these files leaked to us by a patriotic whistleblower who knew absolutely that this was wrong, that it was a violation of the First Amendment, that it was a violation of it in the spirit and the letter. And that's the kind of, I mean, to see these institutions of the establishment argue against this great American tradition of journalism and the First Amendment, it's quite appalling.
It's shocking.
Shocking.
Ms. Subramania, here in the House, we are exposing the U.S. government censorship by proxy, which uses social media companies, academia, and private companies to circumvent the First Amendment. At the same time, we are watching with horror as liberal democracies in Europe and Canada are not even trying to hide their efforts to censor their citizens. We know where this is going, and without exposure and reform, we could be doomed to the same fate. In your opening statement, you discussed the impacts of the Online News Act and the other censorship efforts seen in European nations, and you issue a stern warning that I hope all Americans will take to heart. Could you describe the trends that you are seeing and specifically what tools or mechanisms of control these governments are trying to exert over free speech?
Thank you for that question. Some of the examples are from my testimony. So debanking is one obvious tool that the Canadian government, in a sense, has pioneered as far as Western liberal democracies are concerned. China has been doing that for years, but it's now come to the West. And they went after peaceful protesters and punished them, weaponized the financial system, weaponized the government against them to teach them a lesson. You can't do this ever again. And this sort of thing has a chilling effect on people's ability to express themselves freely. And that's certainly happened in Canada. And what's happening in Ireland, again, another country that I mentioned, what's happening in France, the EU directive on online speech. All of these things are just extremely problematic. And what I want to say something here. What is under threat here is a core value of Western civilization.
That's right.
That is what is being undermined here. And that goes back to the Enlightenment. That is what we have to fight for. And the way you tackle misinformation, disinformation, all of these things which are bandied about loosely by people who want to censor you, the best solution to these things is more robust debate. And that goes back to the Enlightenment period. And that's what I want everybody to remember.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Taibbi, Mr. Schellenberger. Thank you for battling for all of us. Thank you for working so hard to protect our First Amendment rights. We really, really are terribly indebted to you, and you as well, Janine. Thank you.